Hi, I'm Patricia Greenberg. My guest today is Louis Stack, and he's the founder of Fitterfirst, a company that supplies equipment to make our lives better as we age through movement. A little bit about Louis. He has been leading the world to better balance since 1985. His brand, Fitterfirst, is recognized worldwide for supplying products that help people recover from and prevent injury, maintain balance and fitness, and keep moving. My kind of guy. Welcome, Louis.
Hi, thank you very much for having me today, Patricia. It's
I'm
nice to be
thrilled
here.
because I'll tell everybody, the audience, we met at a conference about active aging,
That's
and
right.
I hope there's more of those coming out, not just for your sake, but just for, in general. It's just such a wonderful thing to have available to us. So I wanted to start out by asking you to tell your story of how you got here. Just providing these cutting edge products to keep us moving as we age, and not just sound like a commercial, but you've really turned your life's journey into a business that's a wonderful service to the world. So tell us about that.
Well, and it's funny, like 39 years at this now is a long time, but it's gone through many chapters. And I'm a baby boomer. I'm on the tail end of the baby boomer cycle. So I've often been asked by a lot of people, as to how to age more gracefully and be more active and keep it going. But as we both know, in 1985, we were all young.
Yeah.
And we took balance for granted, but
Yep.
call it good luck or bad luck. I had born with very challenging feet, and to the point that at 14 years old, my feet were size 14,
Oh my
and
goodness.
they did not fit well into any shoes that you could get at the time. And so I wore Birkenstocks a lot, but I was an active skier, and I forced my feet into my ski boots all the time, and I ended up getting spurs on my heels, well, from everything I wore. But I was also born with extra bones in my big toes. So my big toes are grand size. They're very large. Anyways, what it led to is that in 1979, I compressed my knee a little bit and had to get a meniscus taken out because it kept getting caught and locking up. And that was in university. And then in 82, when I got back to Calgary, my feet had just become so bad, the spurs on my heels and the bones, my big toes, that a doctor recommended I get them all fixed. And at one time they did one surgery, all 4 points, toes and heels. And it left me in a situation where I couldn't walk. Like I could walk with my crutches behind me, leaning backwards, and only put weight on the ball of my foot. And if you ever want to try something funny, just try, it's really hard to do that because you can't get your heel down, you can't touch your toe, and I couldn't stand up straight because of the range of motion. So that stopped me from everything, all my sports and my interests, and stopped my life. I couldn't even work.
Oh,
So after that, and Alberta and Canada it was a tough time in the early 80s. Couldn't really get a job because I was poor mobility. My best skill was a waiter, and I just had an arts degree. So I decided to borrow $3,000 from my mom and try to build this concept of a ski machine, which I'd seen historically in other places. There was 2 or 3 different versions, but I started playing with this prototype and took it to some physical therapists, and they loved it. And fundamentally, the reason the company kept growing is I listened to my customers, who are mostly at that time physical therapists, and they told me they loved that product, but they told me what else they needed. And one of the things was a balance board that would adjust in under 5 seconds for various height and not have any extra pieces to it because the pieces always get lost. So that was sort of my marching orders, right? It has to happen under 5 seconds. It's got to be self-contained. And no one really made balance boards in mass scale at that time. They're all just made locally by a carpenter for each clinic. And I started marketing them, and they took off very well, and people loved them. And what carried on is I kept listening to the physical therapists, and any product that came my way, either a therapist might send it my way to look at, and they want me to develop it, or someone else might bring it to me. The test was always if it would be accepted by physical therapy, then I would seriously look at it. But I often cross-pollinated to athletic training, to the fitness industry, to the aging population, depending on the skill set that the product suited. And that led me to people from NASA that I've worked with to all over the world. Like it's amazing. The Fitter, our ProFit, our flagship product, was used in the 80s and 90s. It was used by every pro hockey and football team. Like it was the functional training, godfather product. It was the first closed chain trading product that ever came into the market.
Let's throw something in there. So this
Yep.
is what I wanted to emphasize to people about. We have something going on, we go to the doctor, we figure out what it is, but the troops on the ground are the physical therapists, the trainers. They really see what works, and I think that's what you're saying. So this leads back to that conversation. It's almost like all the roads lead back to balance.
They do. I, you've heard me say this probably, but time and gravity will always win.
Yeah.
There's not one of us in history who will not lose out to time and gravity. That's
Yes.
factual.
Yes.
So you might as well, I like it to a card game. I'm not a big poker player or anything, but if you know you're going to lose in the game, but you want to play as long as you can, play every hand very wisely.
Right.
And that's how we need to look at every day. I always refer to the bus factor. I mean, if you happen to get hit by a bus, it's very unfortunate, but accident, illness, and injury does happen to us. And the better condition we're in before those occurrences, the better condition we'll likely be in after. And so people tend to wait until they're broken and then try to get fixed. It doesn't work. And the older you get, the wiser you get, right? And we all know it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm listening to your own fitness journey and how you've just turned this into a life's mission, which is amazing. This is all I talk about is proprioception and our
mhm.
balance and our sense of space in the world as we go along. So talk about what balance does and doesn't do to your body.
Well, I'll give you some real broad ones. It's the innate body's ability to work with gravity, and it very, very much includes your eyes and your ears. The proprioception that starts in the foot, where you have contact with the earth as gravity pulls you into the earth, that's critically important. But if you have neuropathy in the feet and they're numb, or you put big, huge honking shoes on that take most of your foot sensation and awareness off, well, then you're going to depend more on your eyes and your ears and other factors, other influencers in your life. But the best thing we can do really is use the thinnest shoes possible and have as much contact with grounding to the earth as we can, like walk in grass, go walk on a beach. Like, those things aren't just nice, but they're awesome for your body. And they make all the proprioceptive system tick and work. But my friend Joan Vernakis, who from NASA ran the life sciences there for 40 years, rehabbed every astronaut that was ever on the space shuttle. And if you just for a moment think how hard it would be to come from zero gravity and then reacclimatize to gravity, which is what they do. And her 40 years experience led to one simple thing. If you're sitting down in your waking hours for more than a half an hour, simply stand up and let your body recalibrate with gravity. Your organs decompress, your proprioceptive system has to refire, the eyes and ears recalibrate. And she found that was better than treadmills, than weights, than anything else you could do, is just stand up and let your body work in harmony with the forces of life, right? With gravity and time.
That's what I keep saying. But what's magical now that we know is that walking is the best exercise. It's just getting up,
Unconditionally.
walking.
Yeah. But what I really was thrown a little bit by is that her comments is it's better to stand up in good posture, maybe put your thumbs back or rotate your thumbs back like you're hitchhiking. That gets the shoulders back, right? So be mindful of your posture and be head up, but just let your body have 1 minute to do its thing and then go for a walk. And I thought that was a simple advice. It requires buying nothing. It requires knowing nothing other than the same kind of principles we use, that we know to brush our teeth every morning and night, or at least every night, and we know to put a seatbelt on when we get on the car. Like, that's now second nature. So some of the things about balance, stability, and your relationship with gravity can easily become second nature. You just have to practice. Like, brushing your teeth is a great time to stand on one foot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Or doing a podcast.
Yeah.
I'm balancing on one foot right now.
Louis, you coined the term active sitting.
Yes, that was the
There's
first.
so many things I want to talk about, is standing desks and movement while you're working. But let's talk about active sitting, because we know now sitting is the new bad guy, right?
Right. Yeah. So where that came from my own life experience, was that I was in the World Cup ski racing for Canada from 91 to 95. So I was traveling all over the world, racing in great shape and doing all these trade shows as well, exercising the whole time. My wife was expecting, and that was we had brought balls into Canada, like the fitness balls, in 1994, and they were just really becoming popular in prenatal classes. So my wife was in one, and they had, sitting on a ball doing pelvic girdle rotation and just keeping mobility in the body. So when I came back from ski racing, I found I had a sitting desk. So I got a drafting table instead, because I just didn't want to sit. And, I got a ball, and I just started, 65-centimeter one, and I would sit on it, but you can move your hips around. And, then like I mentioned, I'd straddle it like a horse or kneel on it. And just, the more dynamic I could get, the better, because it just kept me moving. And the essence of active sitting is the pelvic girdle and the hips shift side to side, forward and back, or rotationally, and the head and the shoulders stay in alignment with gravity. And why it's so important to have that kind of movement is then you can work on your keyboard and look at your monitor, without disruption. Whereas if you're sitting on a fixed surface, we know what we're going to do. We're going to lean right. going to lean left, we're going to go back. But all of these things take your head out of alignment with gravity. It's not terrible, but it's not the best thing to do.
Mhm.
It's better to move your hips. And as I mentioned, if you watch a mother with a baby, any time in history, the baby will have been on the hip. You know, this is, I'm talking about, you know, survival of mankind here, not necessarily today. They've got buggies
Yeah.
and stuff,
Mhm.
but you know, a person would have the baby on their hip and often carry food on their head. So they'd have to have good alignment with gravity because you'd have a big bucket of water in your head or food or whatever, and one or two babies on your hip. And when you move, you'd move the baby and your hips would move. And that's how mankind, the nomads and people, the first 9,000 years, that's exactly how our bodies developed.
That's amazing. So again, this sense of space and gravitational pull, it's something nobody thinks about, and that, we are technically fighting it every day. I don't, maybe that's
Yes.
not the best word. You're working to align yourself within the gravitational pull. Um, is there a difference at altitude?
Air gets thinner. I don't believe gravity changes. It's just the
Okay.
thickness of the air. So, but I do know that if you go out in outer space or go to the moon, there's a significant change in gravity. And I mentioned a little earlier about Joan Vernakis. I just want to show you this is her first book. It was about working with G forces, right?
Okay.
And how an astronaut comes back to Earth. And then she did the book that I liked, and when I met her, is called Sitting Kills and Moving Heals.
Mm-hmm.
And again, she's a scientist from way back in '63. She was hired by the Kennedy administration to figure out if human beings would die in outer space or not.
Wow.
Like there was nothing. There was no baseline for her to work off. She had to build the baseline. And so she really had to figure out, and if they don't explode in outer space, then what do you do when they get back, or how do you keep them healthy in outer space? And
Right.
40 years she's on that project. So she learned a lot.
Amazing. Now, you talk about, your light bulb moment. That your wife, you saw how, in nature, how your body needs to kind of realign itself and
Right.
stay fit. So, but in your own experience of finding yourself sedentary, right, which led to your whole concept of the active office.
Right.
And the reason I think this is so important, obviously, it's important for all of us at any age, but people are working at an older age than they used to. People
Yeah.
are we actually, you got kicked to the curb at 60, 65 historically, but now people are, I love bragging about my husband. He's 77 and he's still an active lawyer, and he's working all the time, and we're working at home, and I always go in, get up, go for a walk, go
Yeah.
outside, take a walk around the house. This is really, really relevant to many, many people over 65. So talk to us about the whole concept of not only you coming up with, but what is an active office?
Well, it's pretty much the same thing I mentioned about active sitting, but it's based around standing. So just for simplicity, I'm currently standing on a floating platform called an active office board. If I was on a anti-fatigue mat, I could stand for longer, but I would still sway side to side, and I would just put up with the discomfort of standing still for a longer period of time. Whereas a platform that floats and that moves underfoot means, again, just like in the sitting on the ball with your hips, your feet can shift and you can change your weight back and forth and change your weight around and still keep your head relatively central. And that's one big thing about it. The other big thing is that it's not really about sitting or standing. It's about access to movement. And if you're working at a computer for long periods of time or at a desk, if you're standing, it's easier to turn and step away or just to have movement. If you're sitting, you first have to stand in most cases before you get mobility. So we always want to have a good relationship with the force of gravity. And time is time. We're not doing much about that one, sleep and do the regular things. But it became very apparent to me that 8 hours a day for most people sitting at a desk, and they say, oh, well, I'll go to yoga at night, or I'll fix this later. I'm going, balance and stability is such an easy thing to include in your daily living all through your day. Why would you put it off and hurt yourself at work? And when you get to work or you start sitting at your desk, you're in better condition than you are when you leave your desk. I think it should be a healthy asset and not a health liability. And more companies are getting this. And in Denmark, they've had it forever. They've had standing desks as a norm over there since the first time I was in Denmark in the 80s. And that's where I got exposed to standing desks at the beginning. And just have to look at the culture in Scandinavia. In fact, in Canada, where I'm from, in the 70s, Participation, which is our government's fitness, their first big ad was, did you know that the Average 70-year-old Swede is in better condition than the average 40-year-old Canadian,
Mm.
right? And that shifted Canada's mindset. And we were starting to open our eyes to this reality, right? You can't just take this stuff for granted. And the more, the older we get and the longer we work, the more relevant, as I have in a presentation, I show stability, strength, stability, and cardiovascular is 3 circles. And when we're 20, the 3 are very similar. In fact, balance is actually smaller because we take it for granted. As you age, at 60, the influence of balance and stability is so much bigger than the smaller cardio or the smaller muscular circle, because if you don't have balance and stability and confidence, it's very difficult to get good cardio and maintain muscle mass. So balance just gets bigger and bigger and bigger in the formula with every year that passes. I didn't say that very well, but I think you got the point.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It becomes the primary focus because that's what's going to keep your body upright and healthy. And then if you're keeping your body upright and open and good posture, the cardio and the resistance training will flow a lot better for you. You know, as I'm listening to you, Louis, I think about how much maybe arthritis and stiffness and muscle weakness we could avoid by keeping this active office going, whether it's, again, the office, your home, just keeping your body active in your everyday life and activities. Louis, you talk about aging gracefully through the acronym SAM: stability, balance, and movement.
No, stability, agility,
and movement. Excuse me. Well, I'm through the balance in there because we're talking about it. Stability, agility, and movement. Yes. And it's a prevailing theme throughout all of your work. So tell us about how these 3 approaches enhances our wellness.
Well, it was, again, back to the basis of, making my own life work better from a broken point at 23 years old. Most of us don't have the good fortune of being broken at 23 years old. It sounds like a curse, but it opened my eyes to things, right, that I didn't otherwise know. I was really hard trying to come up with a simple way to help people get an image. So I created a little guy named Sam, and he's a cartoon character that comes to life. He's on our website and stuff. It's called The Return of Sam because he came back again. And basically, if we practice stability habits, like I said, brushing your teeth on one leg or standing up and recalibrating, or just walking, park the car further away, all those basic things that we sort of know but don't always do, that improves your stability in daily living. You just form that habit, like the seatbelt or brushing your teeth. And then what you get from that is better agility at play. And I always like to throw in this weekend. So whatever you like to do, whether your play is to walk to the mailbox and the dogs or to climb Everest, it doesn't matter. It's your stage of life. It's what you do, but you'll do it better. And then the big win is you have better or enhanced mobility for life. And I want to make sure I don't miss this point. There's a really critical thing to this whole message is that I call them neck up and neck down issues.
Okay.
The neck down issues tend to be mechanical and muscular. Neck up is confidence and belief, self-belief. And often when you get hurt or you've had an incident or an illness, your self-confidence goes down. And to the degree you can keep good good stability and agility, so that ability to move around and feel confident in your movement, i.e. a good relationship with gravity, the less of a neck up issue you have to deal with. And if you lose your vision, well, your ears are going to count more. My vision is critical to my balance, and when I get tested for my balance without my vision, I'm in the lowest percentile. Like I'm in the bottom 3 percentile of people. I almost fall over. So I didn't know how critical my vision was to me, but I guess my hearing doesn't work very well or something like that. I'm not sure, but it's funny how that confidence of what you think is what you are, right? And
it all plays a role from head to toe. If something's awry, the rest of us feel a little bit off. So I'm exactly what you're saying. I'm a big proponent, and kind of don't lose sleep over it, and don't spend every waking moment over it, but kind of pay attention to recalibrating like, does something hurt? Does something feel out of alignment? Your intuition tells you everything you need to know. You can feel it both physically and mentally, right? I talk about that a lot in my work. So it's very interesting.
Taking the time to look in a mirror too.
Yes.
Just take the time to look in a mirror with good posture and look at yourself and just know that this is you, accept that, and make sure you're standing up straight. You have that option.
Absolutely. At this risk of sounding like a commercial, I wanted to talk to you a little bit, and we'll get to at the end how people can get in touch with you. So what are some of products, I guess you will, that you endorse for optimal wellness, like the standing desk, ball chairs? I'll tell you, what about the ball chairs that are in a frame? That's what I have in my office.
Yeah, there's a place for them. You've probably seen the round sitting discs as well.
Yes.
Yeah, so they're air bellows. They're called, we
Yes.
call them sit disc or sit bits. But when you put a ball in a frame, it basically changes that ball into being a static ball. The
Hmm.
top still moves, so it's still cushy, and you can move your hips up and down, but you don't get any lateral
Okay.
shift. So when the ball's on the ground, you get that effect of the rolling, right? And so your hips move more dynamically. So a ball on a frame with wheels does have a place, and it was first really endorsed by hygienists who wanted to work on someone's mouth, but
Hmm.
they couldn't touch their chair. So they'd want to scoot around, and their posture, they'd sit all day and they'd be leaning forward. So having more mobility in the pelvic girdle really helped them. And that's really where that product
Oh,
first
that's
started.
interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I do it so the ball doesn't roll around my house. Just keeping it because we have several adults working in a house now
Yeah.
because of the new model is working at home. So we're trying to keep everybody happy between folding chairs, desk chairs, and rolling chairs. So
So
yeah.
the simplest pro tip on that one, every ball has a heavy side somewhere. If you pick up the ball that you're sitting on, set it down in the room or where you want it to be,
Mhm.
it's going to roll to where it wants to be. Let it do
Okay.
that. And then carefully pick it up exactly in that position and put
Ah,
it under your desk. And then when you want to sit down, you just reach down and you roll it out, you sit on it. And when you want to stand up, you get off the ball and let it roll back on your desk.
what a wonderful idea. I never
It's
even
like
thought
training a
about
dog,
that. Hmm.
or you just have to
That's
understand the ball and it will work with you.
Now, you talk a little bit about urban polling or walking sticks. How
Mhm.
do they help you? I'll
Mm.
tell you honestly, my perception, and I hope you can,
Oh, it's fine. Yeah.
squelch this if you will, is that it's a crutch like a cane or a walker.
Yeah, there's two schools of. I started carrying those way back in the 90s,
Mhm.
when they're just starting and they didn't get received very well. For hiking up hills and coming down steep hills, you can adjust the length. They
Mhm.
have a definite role there because you can, watch your impact. And the less stable someone is, the more it gives them those extra, dependencies. Where the cardio benefit comes in, if you're walking and using them technically correct, you're not reaching way forward. You're just kind of getting the lats working and the triceps working, and you're just sort of it's like swinging your arms, but you're getting a little bit of reverse pressure. So you
Okay.
could technically walk faster, but it just distributes your energy requirement more. So it gets your upper body more involved, and there's a rhythm to it. And it does bring a small amount of stability if you're very unstable. But if you're not unstable, you don't, that's not the reason you'd use them. When my knee was bad, I had to have it operated 42 years later again. I got 42 years out of a
Yeah.
half cartilage. So that was pretty good. They were critical to me. We went hiking with friends, and I had to use them both going up and coming down, but particularly coming down. So just walking on flat ground, it just brings your cardio up a little higher and gets a little more upper body involvement, much like cross country skiing.
While we're talking about that, because it's something that I think it feels like an emphasis on lower body. Talk to me about upper body mobility and keeping your body stable.
Hmm. Well, it plays a big role. It's kind of funny though, because if you look at my background, I'm all legs. I've been a
Yeah,
leg
yeah.
guy. I had very strong legs. That's what I found attractive when I looked at people, was what do their legs look like. And as a World Cup speed skier, upper body isn't nearly as important. Core is
Mhm,
important, but
mhm.
it's like in luge. I raced luge before that, and the upper body
Oh,
was
oh,
all
wow.
it
Mhm.
was all upper body because your legs could just do nothing. And hence the reason I did luge is that they opened the track, and I didn't need my lower body because my
Okay.
feet were wrecked, right? So I
Mhm.
couldn't use my feet very well, so I might as well get in a luge sled, is what I figured.
Okay.
But there's a balance there. I mean, if you just isolate upper body exercises and try to have a great upper body and don't maintain your core and your lower body, it's just a bad balance.
Right.
So it's hard to say. I think of someone like Rick Hansen, who broke his neck at a young age. He's all upper body because his legs don't work. So that makes you sort of see that picture.
Mhm.
But I think for general mobility, posture is probably the most important thing, and then core stability and core engagement. There's neutralizers, there's moving muscles and stabilizing muscles, and the little ones are the ones we hurt, not the big ones. Like, it's not the big movers that we tend to hurt. It tends to be the small stabilizers or muscles that are working as a neutralizer when you're doing a certain pattern. So I think paying attention to mobility, flexibility, and rolling is an amazing thing for tight muscles. It also breaks the binding of muscles. When you see older people, they don't move as well. They often have a lot of binding in their muscles, so they
Mhm.
stick together. And if you do like this, on a foam roller and gently roll, you can actually, flush the muscles out, break down that binding between tissues, and even do something called flossing, is where you put pressure on a sore spot and then you move the muscles. that's different than just massaging the sore spot. Flossing is what that term is, and you can floss with a foam roller too, but that really helps you just stay more mobile and feel more agile because your body moves better. So that's what I can say about upper body. It's important to the whole package, but when you're really looking at the forces of gravity, unless you have a reason that you can't use your lower body, to me, core and lower body is more fundamental for aging gracefully and posture.
Yeah, and I always say, so I can throw this in, is what I tell people is that first of all, do your own housework, right? That's always like, if you're having to reach up, one of the exercises I do, and I've been very, very athletic my adult life. I will often go into my library and I do that exercise of taking every book off the shelf, putting it on the floor, and then picking it up again and putting it back.
That's fantastic.
And so it's
awesome.
And I weight train. I do go to the gym, and I have a gym in my house, but I do that just as a, reaching and again, keeping that upper body up.
Yeah. And it's fantastic, especially the fact you put them on the ground. So you have to squat and then extend.
Squat and then get back up. So it's what we call now the new functional movements, right?
There's not a more valuable movement. If you do that with good posture and good alignment, and use your knees for the squat and not bend over, that's fantastic. One of the things Joan also really talked about a lot is that if you're in a hospital bed for any reason at all, you got to stand up as quickly as you can, and get out of the hospital as quickly as you can. It's not against hospitals, but the longer you stay bedridden for whatever reason, the worse your body takes the impact from it. And even if it's a bad flu or a cold, just if you can stand up, stand up. If you can sit on the side of the bed, sit on the side of the bed, but get that upper body upright and hopefully get weight bearing on your feet. And she just swears up and down about that in her 90 years, that there's nothing more important than getting on your feet and get moving again.
Absolutely. Last question I want to ask you, which was, I think it was a quote from Joan that I looked at about your inner ear and keeping that balanced. Yeah. So tell me about that. Is there things you could actually do to work on balancing that? People have that vertigo and these issues as they get older. Yeah.
Well, what happens there is you have something called villi in your ear. They're the little seaweed almost, but they sit in the bottom of your ear, and then there is liquid in the semicircular canal. And if you're sitting in neutral position, everything's sitting like a cup that's sitting upright. As you start to tip the cup, it doesn't hold the liquid very well. And the same thing happens with your ear with bad posture, is that the performance of the villi and the inner ear don't work well if your head's off posture. So when people get on a balance board or on any standing product or our ski machine, and they and they look at their feet, I mean, it's like penalizing themselves, right? As soon as your head posture, our eyes use horizontal and vertical lines. So if you're ever on a paddleboard out in the lake, you want to look at the shore because that's where your stability is going to come from, or the horizon. And so the eyes are critical for that, but they depend on vertical and horizontal lines. The ear depends on being in a natural position, and if it's not there, then you're just taking away the function of it, or reducing
and it's correctable. I mean, like, in other words, as you get older, if you work on these things, you can stave off any kind of long-term.
There's a center in Phoenix called the Burroughs Center of Vestibular Disorders, and it's like a whole big center. I've done a course there, and all they do is work with vertigo. And I mean, if you ever see someone who's got crystals in their ears, and the crystals are a settling of something, and it irritates the villi, and that's what gives them really bad vertigo. And the trick to fixing that is the first time I saw it, I was in disbelief. I thought they're going to break the person's neck because they have to move the head very quickly and try to get the crystals out of the inner canal of the ear, and the ear's all circles, right? But so if someone has vertigo or serious balance issues that have come unexpectedly, there's a very good chance it's something to do with the inner ear, and there are experts who deal with that. And I think that even I've talked to my doctor about, is it worth it to clean your ears or have them cleaned, or how does that work? And he said, well, if someone does have a lot of wax deposits, they can get serious, dysfunction in their ear. But usually it's more about the eardrum. It's not as far back as the semicircular canal. That's further back in.
That's so interesting. And almost everyone I know 60 and over has experienced some of the crystals moving around a little bit. And there's a guy in Chicago called the Dizzy Doctor, and he also works with that also. So this is very interesting and very profound. Louis, this information's been incredibly valuable. And I thank you for sharing your story. And I'm going to have you back because there's so much more to talk about. I want you to tell us what you like about getting older.
I saw that note. I if you can do it gracefully, you get to use what I tell people when it's your birthday. It's one more year to celebrate the wisdom and experience you gained in the last 12 months. So, it's just we get wiser and more life experience the longer we live. And I guess I don't want to say become know-it-alls, but you become familiar with more situations and more things. And as one of my friends I saw just the other day, they were mountain biking and they said they leave the radical stuff to the young and foolhardy. The people don't know what it's like to be broken 3 or 4 times and then try to reheal and survive life, if you will. You see what young people do and the trauma they put in their bodies now. Unfortunately, they don't, just like I didn't either, but you don't know what that's going to feel like when you're 50.
Right.
But I can testify it doesn't
Yeah.
feel great.
Yeah. And
And
it's so funny you say that, because we talk about, what do we do as we get older? What makes us happier? What makes us feel fulfilled with age? And it always comes back to, those little things, feeling good about yourself, feeling stable emotionally. And
yes,
when you're there, you're more apt to take care of the other aspects of your life. So
yeah, that's a
yeah.
neck up, neck
Mhm.
down thing. That's, what I get more passionate about than anything is public speaking and educating
Yeah.
groups, however, whatever's appropriate.
Yeah.
It's on their terms, and it's not selling anything. It's educating people to make good decisions. And I think that the more years we get to practice our art of life, the better, more successful we become at doing it, the more credible I suppose we become too. Also, the world tends to catch up. Like my biggest problem is I've been so early at everything. When I came out with the functional fitter, pro fitter in 1985, like people laughed at me. The doctors laughed at it. A few therapists loved it, but most people said it's too dangerous.
Mhm.
Why would you do that? But it became so mainstream, and that's happened. It happened in the fitness industry for me in the 90s. People laughed at me, and by 2005, it was functional fitness was everything. So I've had a bad habit of just being a little early, and even at the ICAA, or I was just at another big conference for the running event. Only the leading running stores are understanding how important it is to help keep their clients healthy.
Okay.
If you blow a knee or get hurt, overuse injury, you're not buying more shoes.
Right.
You're gone. They've lost that customer at least temporarily. And so, we had a good response, but I felt just like the therapy industry in the 80s that, 90% of the people would look at it and go, that's dumb. We just sell shoes and pants. And 10% say, that will help my customers continue to buy my shoes and shorts. So they see it from a different perspective.
Yeah,
And that's wonderful.
and the sales training of really teaching these young people how to walk someone through life, paying attention to this is critical.
Yeah,
Louis, thank you
okay.
so much. And for more information about Louis Stack and his business Fitterfirst, go to www.fitterfirst.com, FITTERFIRST. And again, Louis, thank
Yeah.
you. Such a pleasure to have you here.
We can make that easier by going to fitter1.com. That's also our website. Yeah,
Fitter1.com.
Fitter1.
Okay. All right.
And I always like to close on a quote I've used a lot, but just please remember that balance is the essence of movement, and movement is the essence of life. You really want to keep moving because you'll enjoy the quality of life will simply be better. And that's relevant to anybody at any age.
Thank you, and beautifully stated. So I want to thank all of you for listening to Eat Well, Live Well, Age Well, and please subscribe to my channel, Patricia Greenberg, on YouTube and available at podcasts wherever you can find them. Thank you all for listening.